Hi, this is Christine Duvivier, and we are here to talk about happier at home, how to go home without going crazy. And so at this time of year, it seems like this is a good time to talk about this, although I think probably any time of year is a good time to talk about this. But in particular around the holidays or times when it's more likely we are going to be back with people, family members or close friends or other people we've known for a long time. And what I've discovered, not only with myself but with other people, is that a lot of times these situations can really just trigger us. And so I was thinking earlier, this was when my daughter actually moved home. So it wasn't me going home, but I've had that experience too. But my daughter moved home, and that was great after college. And one day I was working at home, and I came downstairs, mid-morning, and her breakfast dishes are like kind of on the kitchen counter. And I said, Kate, can you please take care of your dishes? And she, just was like non-responsive. And so I thought, okay, I got to just keep working. And then came down at noon, and her lunch dishes are like piled up, and the grilled cheese pan is piled on top of the dishes, and there's stuff around on the counters. And so again, I said, Kate, can you please take care of this? And nothing happens. So I come down a third time. This is around like 2:30. Still nothing's happened. And she's saying, like, will you stop nagging me? And so I go in, she's watching TV, and I said, Kate, you need to take care of those dishes now. And she kind of flips her hair back, and she says, will you stop nagging me? I am watching Project Runway right now. And so I lost it. And I said, I've been waiting all day for this. You keep saying you're going to do it. She hadn't done it. So she grabs her gym bag, and she storms out the door. And she kind of storms past me with her gym bag. And then I realized, I've made her angry, and she's about to drive across town. And so I lean out the door, and she's slamming the car door shut. And I'm like, drive safely, honey. And I just realized, here I am, I'm picking a fight with her, getting her all angry right when she's about to go drive. So that was not one of my better moments with family. But she was triggering me, right? And so that's what we're going to talk about. And it's not just kids. Parents can trigger us. I've had that. Bosses, of course, can trigger us. But we're going to sort of stick to the siblings can trigger us. So we'll sort of stick to family for now, but this can apply to a lot of different people. And I guess the question that I want to start with is just the question of, can we actually transform relationships with people who are close to us? And what I've found with myself and with others is that, we're not going to do it overnight, but we actually can transform these relationships. And so that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. And the way it's going to work is I've got some things that I want to share with you. I've been working with these kinds of processes for over 30 years now. And it really started with my own personal interest just in finding more ways to be positive. But then I started bringing things I was learning into my work. And I wasn't telling anybody what I was doing. I mean, it was kind of weird to be studying this stuff. But I did notice that I started getting very different responses from people. And I started getting very different opportunities and results. And so little by little, I just kept trying different things that I was learning and practicing them over time. And eventually, I started working on things with my own family. And I know a few people have joined us, and this is all recorded. So for people who are joining us a little bit late, don't worry, everything's recorded, so you'll be able to get it. But so that's how this has happened. And then I just started sharing things with clients, and I was, getting feedback from them that they're transforming relationships with people, with daughters, with mothers, with sisters, with brothers, with bosses, with subordinates. And so it's work that I find very meaningful, and I love sharing it with people. So what I thought was I'd share a few ideas with you to start with, and just to kind of set the tone. And then I'm going to open it up, and we'll just, work with your questions and your situations and see how we might apply this. So if you're able to look online, I've got some slides up for you, but if not, that's fine. You can just listen in and we'll talk it all through. But a few things that I often hear from people that make us crazy with our families, I think revolve in particular around three areas. Assumptions that we make about them, or assumptions that they make about us. And I'm going to say more about each of these. Another area is responsibilities, like things we think that they need to be responsible for, or things that they think we need to be responsible for, or things that we are taking responsibility for, or that they are taking responsibility for. Those are all areas that can end up making us crazy. And the last one is around expectations, where we may have certain expectations of others, or they may have expectations of us. And so what I find is, like, what can happen is, so take assumptions, for example, right? We may make assumptions, or they may make assumptions about us, and so we assume the other person's motives, or we assume the reason that somebody is doing something or not doing something. And so we can end up with, for example, with hurt feelings, right? I assume that he didn't do what I asked him to do because he doesn't care, like, what I think or what's important to me, right? Then I end up feeling hurt. Or they may assume that we don't care about them, right? And they end up being hurt. So that's something that I see happens a lot. We can say, well, a big one I see is responsibility. So, in fact, I just had, who was it? I had a nurse on a call I was running with coaches the other day who said, they just need to start taking responsibility. And I get that. That happens a lot, right? I hear that from parents. He needs to start taking responsibility. She needs to take responsibility. In the example I gave you, I was like, Kate needs to take responsibility of her dishes. Or the opposite I hear. So there's a friend of mine who is always taking responsibility for things. So then she takes responsibility for taking care of a lot of things when she's with family. And when others don't, she gets angry. Right? And so that's one of the things that happens with responsibility, is that people get angry because they feel like, I'm taking responsibility for stuff that you're not, or you should be taking responsibility and you're not. And then I guess this all still boils down to expectations, right? We have certain expectations that we come in with about how things are supposed to be. And so, for example, in my family growing up, the women in my family thought, okay, Thanksgiving's supposed to be a day where we all cook and prepare, and then we sit down for this nice meal, and it's a lot of work, but then it's a really good time. And men in my family thought, it doesn't really matter what we eat. It's just nice to get together. So let's not make this a hassle. So let's not work really hard to cook a lot of really good food. Let's just pizza would be fine, right? So very different expectations come in, right, for us or for them. So those are some things I think that can end up making us crazy with family. But I want to sort of come back to our thoughts, because it's really not about what people do or don't do that makes us crazy. It really comes back to what we think. So, for example, we might be feeling like they want me to do something that I don't want to do, right, for example. So I might feel guilty. Or they should be doing this, and they're not. So I might be feeling angry or hurt. I might think I should be doing more for my mother. Right? My siblings are doing more for my mother. I should be doing more for my mother. I might feel guilty. Right? Or I should be, on top of what's going on with my kid at school. Maybe I feel guilty as a parent. I need to control or change or fix something. That's a big one, right? I need to control what someone else is doing, or I need to change something in the world or outside of me, or I need to fix something that's going wrong here. And all of those are ways that I take on responsibility, but I can end up feeling really resentful or angry or disappointed if it doesn't go the way I think it should. So those are some of the thoughts that I think can end up making us crazy. And this is something that I often say to clients. So I shared it in this email series that I do. So it says, you can't control what anyone thinks about you, but you can control what you think. What would you like to think? And the reason I say that is because I had clients coming in saying, well, she doesn't like me, or he doesn't like me, or they think badly of me in some way. And they were trying to change what other people think about them. But the truth of the matter is, have you ever even tried to control, let's say, a puppy or a 2-year-old, right? People who might actually, or, even a 1-year-old dog that's already trained, right? Have you ever tried to control them or tried to control your child? It's pretty much next to impossible. Or have you ever tried to control yourself when you've said, okay, I'm not going to eat chocolate today, and then you're really, really hungry and there's a piece of chocolate sitting right in front of you? We have trouble controlling ourselves, and we definitely cannot control what someone else thinks about us. There's just nothing we can do about that. But what we can do is we can change our own response or our own way of thinking about the situation. And I think that's what's really important. So another quote that I think comes in here is one that I wrote that I said, I'm going to change my role from I'm going to put this up as a slide so you guys can see it, from chief overseer to first admirer. And this one was really written with kids in mind, right? This idea that we feel like we have to oversee them. But it could be overseeing something for a parent, for a sibling, for a family gathering. But when we feel like we have to be chief overseer, we feel like we're supposed to control some things here. And then we end up feeling resentful or guilty or angry or hurt when it doesn't go the way we think it should. That could also read, I'm going to change my role from chief fixer to first admirer, or from chief pleaser, because this is another one. Sometimes we feel like we're supposed to please other people. And this is another place where I'd say, when we think we're supposed to please other people, there can be a number of reasons for that. But one of the things that can happen is, that I see often, is we think that we are responsible for making someone else happy. And we are not. Just like we have no control over what we think of them, we have no control over someone else's happiness. None. So as soon as we can let go of that and simply move into a role of maybe trying to appreciate something about them or admire something about them, rather than feeling we have to be an overseer, that's a better place to be. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about before I get into your questions is, here are some thoughts that actually make us happier. So if you think to yourself, I will tap into my true power, that's a powerful thought. Instead of thinking they need to change their behavior, or they need to change the way they think about me, right? If you have a thought like she needs to change her behavior, or she needs to change the way she thinks about me, you are giving away all your power, because she's the one that controls that, not you. Your true power comes from within. Your true power comes from your state of being first, by really being aligned authentically with who you are. And we're going to talk more about kind of going into family situations from a place of true power. But so saying to yourself, I'm going to tap into my true power is much more powerful than asking somebody else to change. Another thing we can think is unkind is unhappy. So if somebody's being unkind to us, just know that they're not in their best place. I'm not excusing their behavior. I'm not saying you need to excuse their behavior. I'm not saying you need to accept their behavior. You know, you may choose to leave the room. You may choose to hang up the phone. You may choose to say, I got to go to the bathroom. Anything you need to do to get out of that conversation or that situation is fine. But just know in your heart that their unkindness is coming from their unhappiness. It's not about you. It's about them. Another thought that makes us happier is, I will do what I want. Now, I know that sounds really selfish, but that gets into the next thought, which is the best thing that I can do for anyone is to feel better. Because when I feel better, I'm stronger, I'm more powerful, and my better feeling is actually influential. It's actually like contagious. So the best thing I can do for me or anyone else is feel better, which, going back up to the prior thought, don't take on things just because someone else thinks you should. Don't take on things just because you feel guilty. Get centered in what you really want first and in feeling better first. That's where your power is. And the last thought that can make us happier is there's nothing wrong here. So a lot of times we feel like we have to make the other person wrong or we have to make ourselves wrong. And, you know, it's better if you're going to have to make somebody wrong, yeah, definitely make the other person wrong. That is definitely better. I'm serious. That's going to make you feel a little better, way better than feeling guilty. But we don't have to go there. We can recognize that there's nothing wrong with them. And I want to tell you that where I'm coming from, there is nothing wrong with you. I know that in my heart. There is nothing wrong with you. But often we can feel that there's something wrong with us or something wrong with them. And if we can say there's nothing wrong here, but we are both seeing this situation very differently, we're thinking about it differently, we come with different expectations, different assumptions about it, and I'm just going to stay away for the moment, or I'm going to go take a nap, or I'm going to prepare myself before I get together with you to try to shift my own feelings about it. So that's what I'm going to leave us with, just a few thoughts like that. And here's one for you from Herm Albright. He says, a positive attitude may not solve all your problems, but it will annoy enough people to make it worth the effort. I love that one. So what I would recommend strongly is, before you go into a situation that you know has the potential to be stressful, maybe it's an in-law, maybe it's a parent, maybe it's a sibling, maybe it's all of the above, maybe it's your child, maybe it's at work, but stop. You know, you can do this a day ahead of time, you can do this a week ahead of time, you can do this 2 minutes ahead of time. Just pause and breathe deeply and ask yourself the question, how do I want to be? Not what do I want to do, not what do I want to say, not what do I want them to do. That's all outside of us. That's all a result. But the starting point, the power point, is how do I want to be? So I'm going to pause here and just ask you to think for a moment about, in the next couple of days, when is there going to be a situation that could be potentially stressful for you? And just breathe into this for a moment and think about, how do I want to be? And I'll tell you that a few years ago, I was having typical of me, problems with my parents. And one of the things I found was that I really no longer wanted to talk politics. That it was one of the most interesting things in my parents' lives. They loved politics. They were interested. They always wanted to talk about it. And so when I'd come to visit them, they'd always get into these political discussions. And I had said, this isn't something I want to talk about, but they would do it anyway because it's what they wanted to talk about. And so I began doing what I'm talking about here. I began envisioning, how do I want to be? And I'm not saying it changed the first time or the second time that I visited, but it began to change. And one of the things I said is I want to be calm. I want to be easy and relaxed. I want to be fun and playful. I had never been fun and playful, really, with my mother, maybe a little bit more at times with my dad, but it wasn't really the way my mom and we had a very loving relationship, but we didn't interact like in a fun, playful sort of way. But what's funny about this now is that, first of all, at the time, sometimes I would leave the room when they would start talking politics. I'd just say, I got to go to the bathroom, I got to take a call, I hear something outside, So sometimes that's how I started in the beginning, was just like leave the room. So I stayed calm, didn't chastise them, just said, hey, that's where they're coming from. This is where I'm coming from. But little by little, they no longer talked politics to me. It was amazing. And then meanwhile, I started having these conversations with my mother where we would be laughing and she would be funny and we would be having fun, and I couldn't believe it because we'd never been that way together. So it's powerful when you start by thinking about how you want to be. One last quote. This one I wrote, I've made a new resolution. I'll do my best to be happy even when you're not. Happy New Year to us. So those are what I'd say if you wouldn't roll your eyes, quotes. And I'm going to pause there. And what I want to do is just open it up for your questions and see, how we might apply some of this or something else to what's going on for you. So let me open that up. Who's got a question? If you're able to speak. So I know some of you are places where you're not able to speak. We do have a chat, so if you are online and you're not able to speak, feel free to put a question in the chat. So I had a question. Oh, go ahead. Good.
That's Christine. Hi. What do you do in situations where, with teenagers, as we know, we've all been there, well, many of us, they may not always be rational, and they may not, some of these things are really difficult to do. Any advice for that?
Yeah, so could we talk a little bit about, could you maybe just say one example of something that's not rational in a teen that's bothering you?
Well, as you may know, I'll say, have a great day or try and be happy and pleasant, and I'll get kind of an insult back, totally unprovoked, in my opinion. And how do you deal with that? Just walk away?
Yeah. Okay. Well, so here's the thing. There's two things I want to share, and thank you for that question because it's it could be a teen, but it could also be an in-law, it could be a parent, it could be a sibling. So thank you for that question. So there's two things that I think, there's what you do in the moment, and I'll start with that. But then there's what you do before the moment, which is what I was talking about a moment ago. So let's talk about what you do in the moment. So in the moment, usually what happens is we react, and we usually are focused on what somebody said or did, right? I'll call that an action, right? Whatever they said or did. But a better starting point is to focus on what we're feeling and what we're thinking. So in a moment where you've been having a good day and then your teen comes in and you say something pleasant and they insult you in some way, what do you think you're feeling at that moment? Can you remember a moment like that?
Yeah, frustrated and hurt would be the two that come to mind.
Okay, yeah, anybody would be, right? Frustrated, hurt, sometimes even angry for me, but yeah, definitely frustrated and hurt. So that's the first thing. Actually, we're backing up from the moment right now, so I said we're going to talk about in the moment, but we're just going to understand what's going on in the moment right now, right? So you're frustrated and hurt. But one of the things we can do is we can recognize that our frustration, our hurt, like even the example I gave with my daughter who wouldn't clean up her dishes all day, I was getting frustrated and angry and hurt. But what we can look at is how are we seeing the situation and what are we saying to ourselves about the situation, right? So given some of the things I said earlier, is there anything that comes to mind that you could say to yourself about somebody saying something that's insulting to you that might feel a little better?
Well, it's not about me, I would think.
Right. Yep.
And one of the challenges, even if I say that, then I'm like, well, then what is it about? And I'm trying to decipher what's going on, and you can think of any number of scenarios, and you'll never really know, and you kind of go down a rabbit hole.
Yes. Okay. Yes. So, but saying it's not about me is powerful, right? This is about him or her. And going back to when I said unkind is unhappy, when someone's unkind to us, they are unhappy. So right there we know that. But if it's our teen, then that makes us feel kind of bad, right? Because we're like, oh, I don't want her to be unhappy, right? Or him. So, but we can at least say to ourselves, it's not about me, and this person is unhappy for some reason, right? Now, does that feel a little less frustrated or a little less hurt if you think those thoughts?
It does, but then that leads to, for me anyway, and I don't want to dominate the conversation, but then it leads to the whole fixer. How can I fix it, right? Which
yes. So that gets into, so as soon as we're going into fixer mode, we're having some kind of a thought like, I don't want her to be unhappy. I want to change that. Or I want to understand why she's unhappy so I can help her, right? Something like that, or him.
Yeah.
Is it something like that? Yeah. So then that goes into, okay, would it be okay for me to allow this person to be unhappy if I knew it was temporary? And if I believed that he or she is actually powerful and will find a way to feel a little happier? Would that feel okay?
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that I've learned as a parent, and I'm still learning it, is that when I feel like I need to fix my child's unhappiness, or even a sibling's unhappiness, or even my parents' unhappiness, what I'm doing is I'm not seeing the power in them. And so if I can allow them the space, if I can say to myself, I'm willing to believe that she's powerful or that he's powerful, and I'm willing to believe that this is a temporary situation, and I'm willing to believe that he or she will find a way to feel a little happier. Can you feel the shift in that for you?
Yeah.
Does that help to take a little bit of the edge off?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'll have to try this when the next episode happens, which there's always a next one. So.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Here's the great thing. So what I tell clients is this. In the moment that something happens, all you can do is the best you can do. Mm-hmm. So however you react in the moment, don't beat yourself up about that. Okay? Right. You're just in the moment, and you're functioning, and you're coping with it at that moment. So don't feel guilty later about what you did or didn't say or do. Just let yourself be how you're able to be in that moment, and don't beat yourself up for it. But doing what you're doing now before you go into the moment is really powerful, because now, instead of focusing on what they said, you're focusing on how did I feel right? I felt frustrated and hurt, or I felt angry. But I can shift my thought about that kind of a situation. So the next time that person said something mean to me, I could say to myself, she must be unhappy, or unkind is unhappy. Have some kind of little ready response for yourself, right? So when blank, so I'm going to just use my own example, right? When my daughter doesn't do her dishes, my daughter doesn't live with me anymore, but when my daughter doesn't do her dishes, I'm going to say, she's having a rough day or a rough week, whatever. This is not, this is not about me, something like that. So have something ready that you're going to say to yourself. That's one thing you can prepare beforehand. Another thing you can prepare beforehand is even more powerful, which is what we did a few minutes ago when you stopped and breathed and you thought about how do I want to be. Do you remember a few words that came to mind when you thought, how do I want to be?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what were a couple of the words that came to mind for you?
Calm.
Yep.
Peace or peaceful.
Peaceful, yep.
Those were the two that pervaded me.
Perfect. So maybe, envision, here's one thing that everybody could do right now. Like you can envision the situation that may be coming up in the next couple of days. Envision yourself picking your child up from school, or your child walking in the door, or envision yourself walking into the front door of the home you're going to, right? And envision yourself there. Now, not necessarily right as you're envisioning it, you don't necessarily have to see that person at that moment, but just picture yourself there and feeling calm, feeling at peace. And just hold that feeling in that picture. Feel that calm. Feel that peace. Feel that ease. Feel the calm. All right, that was about 20 seconds we did that. And you could do that once or twice before you go into the situation for 20 seconds or a minute. And I'm not saying that the first time you do it, it's going to change completely. But if you do this a few times, you will find, as I did, that your reaction changes. Your way of being in the situation changes. So that's something you can do ahead of time, right? Instead of just going into the situation. We can think about how we want to be in the situation. Pre-plan it a little bit. And that is really a powerful place to start. As I said, to stay in that feeling state, to stay calmer and easier, we might need to leave the room. We may need to go for a drive or a walk or the bathroom or get a phone, get on the phone or do something, right? Take a nap. But focusing on that ahead of time is where your power is. And again, I should say, I called this happier at home for a reason. Because if we are feeling frustrated or angry or hurt or guilty or depressed or overwhelmed or anxious, we can't jump all the way to happy and gleeful and joyful. But we can take the edge off it. We could feel a little less angry. We could feel a little bit easier. We could feel a little relief. And that's all we're trying to do in the beginning. And that's enough. That's actually very powerful, just to shift that much. So let me pause here. I know some people had to get on a little bit late, and I can stay on for a few extra minutes. So let me see if there's another question. Anybody else have a question about this? While you're thinking, I had a question from a client recently, and he's actually a business client, but he's a corporate leader, but he was concerned about some stuff with his daughters. And so when I said to him, you know, we don't have to see anything wrong in this situation, I said, like, I see nothing wrong with you, but you might also see that there's nothing wrong with your daughter. And he said, well, I want to do that, but how do I do that when she's behaving in a way I don't like? And I said, well, it's different to see that there's nothing wrong with her than to say I don't like her behavior, right? So a lot of times we make the other person wrong because we don't want to feel wrong. But if we accept that we don't have to make either of us wrong, that's a more powerful place to be. So I said, you know, you could see it that she is coming to this situation differently, right? Maybe she's unhappy about something. Maybe she has different expectations or different assumptions. And he was able to rattle off a couple, right? And I said, and it's also not saying you have to accept behavior. Now, with your kids, it's a lot, there's nuances here versus like if you're doing something in corporate, right? With family, I'd say when we're not going to accept behavior, and I'm not talking about if somebody's being abusive, because if somebody's being abusive, you got to get out of that situation and get out and move away from it immediately. But other than that, what we can do is we can just decide, like, either we're going to say, like I would say to my parents, I don't want to talk about politics, and they would continue to talk about politics. So I would excuse myself from the room, or I would just walk out of the room if I needed to. If they're in the middle of the sentence, sometimes I'd just walk away. You know, so it's not that we have to accept their behavior. It's that we don't have to. It's your choice. But you will feel better if you don't peg them as wrong. If you say, they're fine the way they are, this just interests them, they see it completely differently from the way I do, but that's okay. But I don't have to sit and listen to this. That's different. I don't have to sit and listen to this. No. I once had somebody who's a family member, but it's in an in-law situation, say something I found really insulting at the dinner table. And I sat there and I was so hurt and angry. And then I just thought, I don't have to sit here any longer. So I just got up, took my plate to the kitchen, and then went upstairs. And I completely calmed down and relaxed and just saw that, like, I don't need to be upset about this. But I also didn't sit there in that situation where I was fuming and really hurt. Okay, so I'll pause there. Any other questions, thoughts, comments on this? And by the way, that was one of the relationships that has transformed. So, you know, I've just been playing with these things myself in my own life, and I wanted to share them with you because I find they're really powerful. It seems like it's working quite well for a number of my clients. So if there's not more questions, I'm going to bring this to an end, but wanted to share these with you in case they were useful to you. And I would love to hear from you either way. If you didn't find that they were helpful, send me questions. And if you did, would just love to know that. But anything else on your mind before we sign off? All right. I know a number of you are places that you can't speak, so sorry about that. But anyway, I wish you all a lovely Thanksgiving. I wish you some calm and some peace and some inner alignment and power, because it just feels so good. Even if you only get it for a couple minutes a day, it feels so good. Does somebody want to say something here? Okay. There is one last thought I want to leave you with. It just came to me now. Everyone believes what they want to believe, and I don't have the need to change anyone's beliefs. But I will say to you that one thing that I have found incredibly helpful over the last few years, and I lost my father a year ago. He passed a year ago, right at this time. And I and I was very close to him and loved him very much, and still do. But everyone told me the grief was going to be overwhelming, and I never had any grief. And the reason it is, and I waited a year to tell anybody this because I thought maybe it's going to hit, maybe it just hasn't hit me yet. But the reason I'm sharing this is, and it relates to the people that we're talking about right now, the people you're going to see this week. But it also relates to people that have passed. And that is, I have found that I've come to believe, and I've come to know, but I don't say that anyone else has to know this or believe this, that our relationships here on earth are eternal relationships at a spirit level. And knowing that in my heart is something I've only come to know and believe in the last few years. But it has helped me enormously. I believe it's the reason that I haven't felt grief, because I feel that I have an eternal relationship with my Father. I feel He's still here for me, here with me. And I also feel that even when I'm having trouble with people here in my life now, that if I know that I have an eternal relationship, well, for somebody I don't want to see anymore, this may be a little different, but for anybody that I love and I'm feeling bad that I haven't, that our relationship isn't in a good place, knowing that it's eternal has been very soothing to me. So I just wanted to share that thought with you and offer you that as well. So thank you for being here today, and big hugs to you and to your loved ones, and I hope you have a beautiful week this week. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.